everybody, and welcome to the Maria Gonçalves podcast. I'm your host, Maria Gonçalves, and today we have a special guest. It is Kelly Palmatier. So, welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. Hi. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited that Kelly's with us today. So, I'm just going to read you guys a little bit of bio, a little bit of information about Kelly. So, Kelly is an award winning, internationally known psychic medium with over 30 years of experience. She has been connected to spirit since childhood, and over the years, she has deepened her abilities through mentorship, parapsychology studies, and decades of intuitive practice. After 20 years as a successful business owner in web design and marketing, she followed a direct calling from Spirit in 2017 to step fully into mediumship. Now, through channeling white light, she offers psychic and mediumship readings, both in person in, is it Asheville, North Carolina?
Yes, it is.
Oh, very nice. And remotely to help her clients find clarity, peace, and connection, which is so important. Kelly is also passionate about service, and Kelly has also been active in animal rescue and foster care, always driven by a desire to support and uplift others. So, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So, one of the questions I was going to ask you, because on your website you share a story about seeing spirit when you were 8 years old. Can you share that with our listeners?
Sure. When I was 8 years old, my stepfather who raised me, my papa led the family in a séance after dinner. It wasn't until years later when I realized that this wasn't typical. But, not everybody has séances at the dinner table. But I thought it was pretty interesting at the time. He lit a candle and he just guided the family to open ourselves up and say if we felt anything or and he guided the seance and he's like, if any spirit has anything to tell us, let us know. And I spontaneously channeled the spirit of my great grandfather.
Oh,
And
wow.
he told us that my mother was going to get a job as a television host in Atlanta, which was 300 miles away, and we should start looking for a home. And all of that came to pass. So it was one of the first signs that I would go on to become a professional medium.
Oh, wow. So, was your family a spiritual family or were they atheists? Like, what was the background?
I would say we were spiritual. I was baptized as a baby, and we did occasionally go to church, Easter and that sort of thing. We celebrate Christmas. So I would say I was raised casual Christian,
Yeah.
with a lot of spirituality.
Oh, that is very cool. So, does mediumship run in your family?
Not necessarily. I do have one grandmother in spirit who was very spiritual, very strong with her faith, and every morning she would read the Bible or other spiritual texts. And she probably had some abilities. She was a very wise woman, but we never talked about that. So I don't believe anybody had it the way that I practice it now, but she probably had some skills.
So, growing up after that experience, did you have more spirit experiences?
I had little things happen like ghost stories, and then other little experiences around the house like psychic things. I can tell you, for example, one of the ghost stories that we had, if you're interested in
Oh,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah, so this was actually after we moved to Atlanta for my mother's job as a TV host. We actually moved to Atlanta when I was 9 years old. We moved into this new house, beautiful house, 3 stories, and one day, this was like the second day that we were there, I was upstairs on the third floor getting dressed, and I had my door closed because I was getting dressed, and I heard a knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. And I said, "Who is it?" And there was no answer. So I ignored it. I figured it was probably my sister knocking and running, little teasing games. And I continued getting ready, and then I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. And again, I said, "Who is it?" And there was nobody answering. So I ignored it. finished getting dressed, opened the door. There was nobody there. I went downstairs and complained to my sister, "Why were you knocking on the door and running? That's so immature." And she completely denied it. And finally, my mother said, "Kelly, your sister has been downstairs with me the entire time you were upstairs." So we were all kind of wide-eyed about like that, wow, that's interesting. I
Yeah.
don't know what to think about that. So that evening we told my papa about it, and he said, "Oh, yes, how interesting. As a matter of fact, the first night that we were here, your mother and I were just settling into bed when I heard a knock on the door. Your mother was sleeping, but I heard a knock, knock, knock on the door, and thinking it was one of the children, I said, 'Come in.' And I didn't see anybody enter, but I felt a warm spirit welcoming us to the home." So that was really exciting, and we enjoyed sharing that story for years. It wasn't until many years later that we experienced it again. It was right before we left. My papa heard that knock, 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 and he said, "Come in." And he didn't feel anybody, he didn't see anyone enter, but he felt an energy come in as if to say goodbye before we moved out.
Oh, wow. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So over the years with your mediumship, like when you were a teenager, what was your mediumship like?
Well, I didn't actually identify as a medium, despite having spontaneously channeled my great-grandfather.
Yeah.
I I didn't identify as a medium. I thought that was just sort of an anomaly,
Yeah.
especially because we were having a séance. I
Yeah.
didn't think of it as having been related to me or my skills, especially because also I always thought that a medium was the way I would see it, portrayed by Hollywood. So I imagined that mediumship was a a special person perceives a full body apparition walk into the room, and then they have a conversation and they're speaking to each other in full sentences that are audible to each other. And it wasn't until many years later that I realized that that's not exactly how mediumship works, or at least not for me. So I always thought that I was psychic. And I had lots of psychic experiences, especially all throughout high school and college. I used to answer the phone. This was long before caller ID. I would answer the phone greeting my friends by name. "Hi, Leslie. Hi, Jean. Hi, Mitchell." Which was always fun as a teenager because my friends thought it was cool. And there's nothing better to be when you're a teenager than cool, right?
Yeah.
So I really actively worked at developing my psychic skills all throughout high school and college. I actually studied parapsychology at University of Kent at Canterbury in England, and mentored with professional psychic Joe Wynn when I was over there. And I really got quite strong with my psychic skills. But again, I didn't identify as a medium. Now, my own mother passed in 2012, and I did at that time start to be able to easily recognize when I felt the physical presence of her spirit.
Yeah.
And I had some special things happen with her. But finally, in 2017, I was sitting at the base of a waterfall, meditating and praying, talking to spirit, and I asked for a sign. I said, I want to make a difference in the world. If there's something I can do to help people that I'm not already doing, please give me a sign and I'll try to follow what you say.
Yeah.
Well, I was expecting something subtle, a friend loans me a book or something like that. But what I got was, boom, a direct message on the spot just popped into my head telling me to become a medium to channel loved ones who've crossed over. So I was like, okay, how shall I do this? And boom, I got the direct message that popped into my head on the spot. Read books, spend time in meditation, connect with other psychics and mediums. So I started doing all of that right away. By the end of the month, I was channeling.
Oh, wow. So I wanted to ask first of all, because you mentioned you studied parapsychology. So, for those that are listening to us right now and they don't know what that means, can you explain to our listeners?
Yeah, so when we're talking about parapsychology, that is the scientific study of of psi phenomena. So that can be things like telepathy, precognition, telekinesis, all different manners of psychic energy and some ghost huntings and things like that. Now, in my case, I don't have a degree in parapsychology. I don't want to misrepresent myself,
Yeah.
but I took a course led by Professor Chris Cherry, and it was the self, issues in philosophy, religion, and parapsychology. So we touched on that in the general coursework. And then I actually became friends with my professor, Chris Cherry, and we would do experiments after the fact, like just outside of classrooms, we would try telepathy experiments back and forth where I would sketch things and that I'd seen and stuff like that. We did some of the Gansfeld experiments. I got involved in a group in Canterbury where we did table tilting, and there was somebody measuring the weight loss in the table. So lots of little things like that. It was really more like the hands-on type things. A lot of this parapsychology learning that I did was really just my own study,
Yeah.
although technically there was a course that was involved there.
I think that's so cool because I haven't heard of that. I have on my bucket list to do table tipping. I've never done it. I have no clue how that works. But I think too, when you go into this, it's like you go in with fun and just exploring, right? So, I know one of the things that you're passionate about is trusting your intuition. Because I know a lot of people, and I'll hear this, it's like, oh, I heard this or I had this gut feeling, but I just ignored it. So,
Yeah.
and I feel like mediumship is very like, everybody's like, I want to be a medium. And then we forget, like, we're psychic too. Let's embrace all of us. So, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so you brought up a couple of things. So the
Yeah.
one I want to talk about right now is that you're psychic too. So, psychic just means that you pick up on information outside of the five physical senses.
Hmm.
So every medium, if you're a medium, you are using those skills to connect with the loved ones who've crossed over, right?
Yeah.
When you think about it, you're connecting with spirit. How is the spirit getting the message through to you? Unless it's like, they're walking in like a 3D figure into the room, then you're getting it through your psychic senses. You're hearing a message. You are, in my case, I physically feel the energy a lot. Sometimes I'll get psychic smells that are, like for example, oh, I'm smelling freshly baked bread and I'm smelling motor oil. Oh yeah, my grandmother used to always bake and my father was an auto mechanic. So, we're using these psychic skills as we do our mediumship work. So it may be that you don't do psychic readings, but you are still a psychic. Every medium is technically a psychic, but
Yeah.
not every psychic is a medium.
That
Yeah.
that is true. I think that's the debate. I think that's like the debate is, are you born a medium or are you taught to be a medium? Because you always hear that debate, right?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily feel like it's a debate myself
Yeah.
because I feel like a debate is like this side's right. No, this side's right. And I feel like both sides are right.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just like so many other skills. You may have something that you inherit from your ancestors where you have a certain propensity, uh, but I think that everybody has some degree of ability. So
Yeah.
even somebody who has a natural propensity, they they can develop it to be stronger. And somebody who is, not that's not really their thing, they can develop it to have a stronger sense of intuition.
Yeah.
So I think it's both.
I think so. I think so too. I always, because when people ask me that question, I'm like, it's like kindergarten. When you're in kindergarten, everybody can draw the yellow sun with the little lines, and everybody's like, look, I drew the sun. And
We're
then
all artists.
yes. And then our friends go off to high school or university and then they draw the sun and you're just like, Wow, that's breathtaking. But I can no longer draw the sun the way they used to. So I feel we kind of all start the same, and then it's like you say, if it's part of your soul's calling, it's going to develop so much deeper, which I find so fascinating. Uh,
Well, and just to be honest, I work at it.
yeah,
So, as a professional medium, I work regularly at strengthening my skills all the time. And I'm much stronger as a medium now than when I went professional, years ago. Because it's a muscle. You use that muscle, you work it out, you get stronger.
so for people that are brand new to this, and because you said you work at it, is there
Yeah.
like an exercise you would suggest for people that are just beginners, just one exercise?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. Um, so I'll tell you one thing. For me, I love getting exact names in readings.
Yeah,
I just love it. It's my favorite. I mean, the funky, cool stories, the inside jokes, the family memories, those are great.
yeah,
I love those too, especially when they're really bizarre. But when I get an exact name, I'm like, yeah. Especially when I get exact double names, first and middle or
yeah,
first and last. I love that. But, that's how do you become better at getting names, right? So that was something I didn't have any mediumship book that taught me how to get better at getting exact names. So what I did is I just decided that, putting my intention there, that's what I was going to do. That's a big part of it. But
yeah,
then I actually got like a book of baby names and I would read a few pages every day before I meditate just to kind of get my brain, my neurons, more
yeah,
focused on names. I would study the list. Like I went online and I pulled up, the 100 most popular names in the US in the past 100 years. And so I pull up the list and I would study this list and I would kind of feel like, all right, so let's say the name Jennifer is one of the most popular names, right?
yeah.
So I kind of focus in, what does the energy of the name Jennifer feel like, you know?
Hmm.
And so then when I'm doing my readings with clients, I tend to get more names now. The other thing too is by studying,
Hmm.
if I'm getting sometimes I like might get pulled, for example, you get pulled towards the letter J, the most common letter of first names, at least in the US. So let's say I get pulled towards a J. I might not get Jennifer right off the bat. Sometimes I do. Sometimes just today
Yeah,
I did a reading and I'm like, Malik, you know? So sometimes boom, I'll just get an entire name in my head, but sometimes I'll get it in little fractions. And
yeah,
so it might be something like, I feel like I'm getting a J name, and they'll be like, yes, her name does start with a J. And so then what I do is I can if it's not automatically coming, well, sometimes it'll come as I'll be like, "Nah, nah, nah, I'll be like, I'm getting three syllables. And so sometimes I'll work it like that and they'll be like, yes, it is three syllables. And then I can like run down, Julianne, Jennifer, like kind of
yeah.
mentally run down and feel into the energy of each of those. What is the energy of Joanna feel like? What does the energy of Julianne feel like? What does the energy of Jennifer feel like? And then I'll be like, ooh, is it Jennifer? Yes, it is. And so that's how I'll get more exact names.
Oh, I think that's so cool. So I hope for those that are listening or watching this video, I think that's a really cool way that Kelly does it. I know for myself, I don't really get names. I remember once doing a reading and um it was somebody's son that had come through and his favorite holiday was Christmas. And he kept talking about the stockings. And I'm like, there's something about coal. But I thought the coal, you get the lumps of coal. And the
Yeah.
mom's like, no, no, that's my son's name. I was like, oh, so I get it like completely different until they were like, oh no, that is a name. And I'm like, oh, that's
Yeah,
good.
a lot of times you just have to listen to what you're getting and not be
Yeah.
stuck in your little box of what you think it's going to be. That
Yeah.
happens a lot. I remember one time, this was very, very early in my career as medium, I was seeing a stream And I was like, ooh, it's flowing. And it's like, I feel like I want to say something like flow. And my client says, yes, that's her name, Flo. And it was like short for Florence, but I wasn't feeling it like a name at all.
Yeah.
But once you get it, it's basically spirit just has to bring it to you in a different way sometimes.
Oh, that is so true. And I think too, it's what you said. It's about intentions, setting
Yeah.
the intention. But I've always heard the baby book, like get the baby book, look
Oh,
at
you
your
heard
name.
that? See,
Yes.
I thought I made that up because, because no, I hadn't heard it anywhere. And I'm like, well, how shall I get my brain wrapped around names more?
Yeah.
And I just asked the question. So, but now the other thing is at one point you were talking about trust, and
Yeah.
we need to get back to that because that's important, especially when you start things with exact names, because sometimes I'll be like Kenny, and my client will be like, no.
Yeah.
It happens, and
Yeah.
that's the life of a medium. It's funny because I'm such a perfectionist. I work so hard to be professional and do everything right if I can. And of course, I've chosen a profession that I don't have any control over, right? So I've learned that this is one of my life's journeys is that I have to accept imperfection and just accept. I have to be okay with putting myself out there and saying things that might completely be wrong. Sometimes I'll say things that are outrageously, bizarre and strange, and it's like right on the mark,
Yeah.
like albatross around the neck or inflatable Tyrannosaurus Rex, and they're like, yeah, that makes sense. What? But you have to have that trust. You have to be okay saying something completely outrageous and having the client say, no, sorry. Or
Yeah.
sometimes they'll call you later or text you later. Guess what? That really made sense. That was the name of her dog. You know,
That is so true.
Yeah.
So for mediums that are beginning on their journey and they're starting readings, but they're not paid professionals yet. They're still learning and they're getting those no's and they're struggling with the trust. What would you say to them?
Well, part of it, in my opinion, is educating the client.
Yeah,
So I start every reading I do with kind of educating the client. I say, the very best psychics and mediums are typically 80 to 90%.
yeah,
So, it's very helpful to me. I have to raise my vibration. Spirit has to lower their vibration. We'll meet somewhere in between, and then I'll pick up on little tidbits, little flashes of information, convey that to you, and hope that it makes sense, right? And then I say, you can help keep the vibration high, keep the energy flowing just by acknowledging. If I say something that makes sense, please say yes. I understand that makes sense because blah, 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 without giving away too much new additional information, of course. And I definitely don't want to know anybody's exact names until or unless I ask for them.
yeah,
And then I say, on the other hand, if I say something that doesn't particularly make sense, that's okay. Instead of making a big deal out of it, I prefer we just leave it. What I find is a lot of times things could make sense later. If not, no big deal.
yeah. Oh, I like that. So for those of you that are listening and you're on your mediumship journey and you're getting the no's, just let it go. It's not a big deal.
But
And
I had to learn to tell my clients to
yeah,
stop saying no, no, no. Because if they do, my energy just immediately says, I'm doing it wrong.
yeah,
And then it's like hard to get anything. So if
yeah,
you find, I've actually had it happen before where I've had to interrupt a reading and say, okay, now I understand that this doesn't resonate with you at the moment. That's okay. Let's just leave it for a moment. It might make sense later. If not, no big deal. Maybe it's not your spirit. Let's just roll with it for a couple minutes and see what else we get. And then, I'll keep talking. And then suddenly, thankfully, a lot of times they'll be like, I wasn't even thinking of my Uncle Joe. Something like that'll happen. Because, psychic amnesia.
oh, it's true. I've done that when I've received readings and people are like, I got so and so. And I'm like, I don't know who you're talking about. And I think too, because our loved ones, if they passed away a lot older, they got a lot of memories, a lot of experiences. And now you're basically going through that Rolodex inside your head, trying to remember all the memories of each one of your loved ones too, as a person
Mhm.
receiving the reading. So
Yeah.
I love that. Just being patient with ourselves. So for those that
Yeah,
are listening, be patient with
absolutely.
yourself.
Yeah.
And
On a similar note, I'm sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. I just thought of a good
go.
point that I should share. Don't be afraid to stop a reading. If it's not working, you can just say, I'm sorry, this doesn't feel like I'm connecting very strongly. We can try again another time, or, maybe it's just not a good connection here. Let me just refund your money. And, sorry, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
No big deal. But that's better than sitting there thinking, oh, I have to make this work.
Yeah.
It's just know that there are going to be some times when it doesn't flow. And that might be because maybe you didn't get enough sleep, or maybe you're not, doing well that day. But it might be that the client's energy is way off, or it might be that the spirit you're channeling, was very quiet in life, and or that maybe that spirit is still kind of going through some transition and learning and growth, and it might not be as easy. So it takes all three. So don't be hard on yourself. Don't feel bad about having to say, this doesn't feel like it's working. Let's try another time.
Oh, I think that's so important for those that are listening that are aspiring medium psychics to give yourself permission to be
Mhm.
like, it's not working. Because I have heard stories where mediums have done readings and it didn't go the way they wanted, and then they quit mediumship. And it's like, no, don't do that. Don't
Yeah,
quit. Don't give up on yourself. Keep going. Keep trying.
yeah, yeah,
So then I am wondering how to navigate skepticism and doubt.
yeah. So I figure it's not my job to convert a skeptic. Most skeptics who outright say I'm skeptical, a lot of them just there's no way that you can convert them. People tend to be very firm in their beliefs. So don't feel like you need to convert someone who's skeptical. Now, on the other hand, if there's someone who is open-minded, but just cautious, that's fine. That's great. That's where it comes in. You want to be an evidential medium. You don't want to just say, yeah, they're so spirit and they love you and they're proud of you. That's beautiful. But if you can get those evidential hits before you get into the more generalized feeling messages, then when you get to those feeling messages and you say, she's so proud of you, then your client says, oh my God, I needed that. Right? So
Yeah.
it's important to be evidential.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. So I'm wondering, in the beginning of your mediumship journey, were you a skeptic? Did you ask a lot of questions?
Yeah, so because I didn't really understand how a medium worked before, when I first started becoming a medium and actually channeling loved ones, for me it just felt too darn easy. I was
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, is this real? Am I humoring myself? Am I lucky? And so I would keep getting hits. My clients would tell me that I was getting things right. This was back when I was like doing free readings just for the experience. But I was like, it went viral in my local market, so I got tons of experience, and I would keep getting people telling me I was doing well, but I was definitely like, I think it's going well. I don't know. Is it real? And then one day I was doing a session and I said, is there a Ray or a Roy? And
Yeah.
everybody in the room gasped. His name is Roy Ray. I was like, holy wow, I am really doing it. Like,
Yeah.
that's not just a lucky guess someone's going to get, you know?
Yeah.
Exact double name. So, yeah.
I find that so cool. I find too when we are in that questioning period of spirit, like, I don't know about this, and spirit comes and it's like, let me show you. Let me show you you're going down the right path. You totally got this. Because then all
Yeah.
the synchronicities begin to happen.
hmm But also don't feel bad if you think you hear something from spirit and it turns out not to be accurate. It's not 100%. So, you can have a general policy of I'm going to listen to my intuition. I'm going to listen to what my spirit guides are telling me. Listen
Yeah.
to my higher self. You can have that as your general policy, but then you can say, well, does this feel right though? like I thought I got this, but I don't know. You can kind of keep your eyes out for the synchronicities or other things that kind of reaffirm it for you, but you
Yeah.
don't have to have 100% blind faith on every single thing,
Yeah.
right? Just recognize that not everything's going to be 100%, but you can still trust and you can still try.
Oh, I love that. So over the years, has your mediumship changed?
Well, it's definitely gotten stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I do find also that I am much more um like on that edge of skepticism. Like I've read so many accounts of what why the skeptics say that what we're doing is total BS. I've read so many different accounts that I find myself kind of acknowledging some of their doubts as I go through a standard reading. Like, for example, earlier when I mentioned I'm getting the letter J, sometimes I'll actually say in my readings, I'm getting the letter J. Now, the letter J is the most popular first name initial, blah, 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 but nevertheless, that's what I'm getting, And so I sometimes I'll find that I tend to do those type of acknowledgments to kind of educate my customers so that they're not falling for cold reading techniques by other people, or people who may think that every medium does cold reading techniques. I find that I kind of point these things out as I go along to show that I know what cold reading techniques are,
Yeah.
and I'm not doing that,
Yeah.
right?
And that's why the evidential mediumship part is so
Yeah.
important to prove. Um, so I
Well,
noticed on your website, you're a psychic detective. Can you tell us more about that?
yeah, so I don't do a lot of that. It's definitely not like my main gig, but I have had law enforcement reach out to me a few times, and I have given, all the information that I'm perceiving over to them, and I have been told that it was very helpful. It's
Yeah.
funny though, when you work for law enforcement, it's not nearly as rewarding as when you're working for the general public because I might get all these things, I'm getting this name and this cause of death and these people involved in this geographic location and this type of building and like I list off all these things and in a regular reading, every single thing that I would say that was right, they would be like, oh, yes, whereas with law enforcement, crickets. Thank you. And mhm.
It's the
Because they
validation,
can't
yeses
share.
and nos.
Yeah, they can't share what anything that's with the case, right?
Which makes
So it's
sense.
it's a little weird. Yeah.
So I am just curious, were you always drawn to that, or did that just kind of happen by accident working with law enforcement?
I'm interested in it because, like so many people, I like to watch the crime shows
Yeah,
on TV, or I used to like them more. I'm getting a little sensitive where I have to be careful which ones I watch, but still, I'm interested in it from that standpoint. And of course, I really want to help others. I really want to make a difference. And if I can help law enforcement solve a crime or help point them in the right direction, of course, it's the law enforcement that solves crimes, not psychics. But if I can help give them some clues that are, you know, beneficial, then
yeah,
by all means, I'm drawn to that. I want to be able to help. And I do my work for law enforcement for free. I donate up to a certain amount.
yeah,
And so, yeah, I'm definitely drawn to it, but it's not my main gig.
yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
just curious, were you trained in psychic detective, or that's just more, that's where spirit led you?
I wouldn't say I was trained in it. Because I was interested, I did pick up a couple of books, read,
Yeah,
written by other people who do psychic detective work. So I did read that.
yeah.
And then I just gave it some thought, what would be beneficial, what would be helpful, what would be professional, and I came up with my own policies and how to proceed.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that because I know a lot of people are always curious about that. So, thank you. So,
Yeah.
here's a question I like to ask. all my medium guests. So for people that are brand new to mediumship, students, and they're just so excited with psychic and mediumship, and there's so much out there like you had shared, what would you recommend step one be for them? Like the beginning, so they don't get so overwhelmed by everything.
Yeah. Well, for the number one step, I would say set your intention,
Mm,
set your goal.
yeah,
Um, because it's one thing to say, I want to be a medium because I want to communicate more with my mother who passed. Or do you want to be someone who's standing on a stage channeling evidential information for a large group? What's your intention? So that's one thing. But then, if we're talking about development, I would have to say that meditation, pretty much hands down.
yeah. Oh, I like that because that does help. So I noticed you have this beautiful angel behind you. I have one too. Mine's different.
Yes.
That one. So, are you, I'm assuming you're into angels?
I do love angels, yes. I'm not an angel expert or anything. I have friends that angels are their things, but I who doesn't like angels?
I know I had to ask because I saw that angel there and I thought, oh my goodness, that angel is so beautiful. And
Yeah.
then with spirit guides, because I
Hmm.
know people ask about spirit guides. How do you feel on that topic?
I believe everybody has spirit guides.
Yeah,
And, sometimes I'll call on my guides if I'm doing a particularly difficult session or
yeah,
a session where I feel like it's really important that I get the information right, but maybe the spirit isn't communicating as strongly as I like. I might ask my spirit guide to kind of come in and help out. And
yeah,
then I always rely on my guides to help with my protective barrier and be my gatekeeper. So
yeah.
yeah, I think that we all have spirit guides and they benefit us all in some way.
So I'm curious with spirit guides, do you know who they all are? Or is it more just as a collective for you?
A little bit of both. I have one in particular that I know by name, Alamina Marzana. And that I actually, oh, that's sweet. She's actually just stepped up right when I said her name. Um, so she was my first spirit guide that I really got very strongly connected with, and that is actually came about because I was strongly seeking my spirit guide. I really wanted to be able to call her by name, and of course now I realize that your spirit guides typically don't really care what you call them.
Right.
But I was like like I'd be meditating and I'd be like, is it? I felt like, oh, the name Chris just popped in. No, it can't be Chris. That's much too common of a name. Oh, I got the name Zia. No, no, it can't be Zia because that sounds nice and exotic, but there's a restaurant down the street named Zia, so that's probably it. So it can't be that. It's like I was very, hard. It's got to be just the right level of exotic.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but what happened was, at the advice of another provider, I was practicing. I don't know if you're familiar with light language, like
Heard of
speaking
it.
in tongues.
Yes. Yeah.
So speaking tongues, and this isn't something that I do normally, and I felt quite silly actually because it was strongly out of my comfort zone. But in
Yeah.
the privacy of my own home, I tried doing a little bit of this love language, this speaking in tongues, just to allow myself to vocalize things that might be coming in from spirit, just like with automatic writing.
Yes.
You can allow your hand to be loose and just flow, and what comes through, and you might end up getting some very, special messages with speaking in tongues or light language. It's just like that. If you just allow yourself to la kapi san chapa la si, vocalize lots of weird syllables that don't necessarily mean anything to you, that sometimes you'll end up getting something that's beneficial. And at the very least, you can start to allow yourself more comfort as especially if you're picking up on things more physically as a medium to allow things to flow through. So anyway, I was practicing with that and I realized I was repeating some of the same syllables over and over. Alamina Marzana. And after I'd said it several times, I was like, Alamina Marzana, that is her name. And then Spirit was like, whoosh, yes, it is.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. That is so cool. I'm still trying to figure out my spirit guide names. I think in the beginning of my journey, I was obsessed. It was like, what's your guide's name? Where's your guide from? And then after years, it was like, I just know they're there. I'm good. I don't need to
Yeah,
do anything. But I love
right.
that story. That's such a beautiful
Thank
story.
you.
So you had, when we started the chat, you have something new going on. Can you share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I just finished writing a psychic credibility scoring system. It's a full guide, like a little booklet. It's about 60 pages, where it guides people through how to determine if a psychic or medium has signs that they're likely to be legitimate, or if they may have red flags that could be warning of potential fraud or con artists. And this is so important because, you know, every time we have a very strong, talented professional medium show their stuff, unfortunately, it opens the door for con artists to come in and pretend to be legitimate. So the more people that we kind of convince or show that it's possible, the more others have the potential to get scammed. And I was just thinking we need to have a system. There needs to be something so that the average person can tell the difference. So I came up with this. There are actually 50 different evaluation points where you can say, is this something that is more likely to be legitimate or is it more likely to be fraud?
Yeah,
And, some of them are very simple things. Like, for example, how did you find the medium? Did you find them because it was referred to you, they were referred to you by a trusted friend who had a reading and it was highly evidential? Great, you get 2 points for that.
yeah,
But did they approach you and say, I have an important message for you from spirit. Um, or, your mother's spirit is stuck and needs help crossing over. Like if they approached you, then that's a much stronger potential red flag, right?
yeah,
So that's something I'm not going to say that it's always um, a con artist that would approach you and pressure you in that way, or that, it's always legitimate if somebody trusted had a reading, but you get points for that.
yeah,
And so I've got 50 different evaluation points that you go through and you say, all right, well, next, are they using a real name or are they using, Starlight Angel, their stage name so that you can never find out who they truly are?
yeah,
And so you get points for or against. So the average layperson now has a system where they can look through and just answer each question. How did the reading make them feel? Did it make them feel uplifted? Did it make them feel at peace? Did it make them feel anxious and worried? Did the provider wrap up the session, nicely at the end, or did they pressure you? You have to come back to get the more services, you
yeah,
know? And so it's a free guide, the psychic credibility scoring system. And in the near future, I hope to put it out there where people can actually come to me, where professionals can come to me and have a third party evaluate them and say, okay, here is your psychic credibility score. If you want to, put on your website that you are an gold level
yeah,
psychic credibility provider, excellent.
yeah.
You know.
Is that on your website, that book? Can
Yes,
people,
it's a
okay.
free download available on my website. Yeah. My website is channelingwhitelight.com because I'm channeling white light towards a better world.
And we're going to have all of those links for you because I was just talking to you earlier. because that's your website. You are on a TikTok, Channeling White Light. You're on Facebook, Channeling White Light, and you are on Instagram, Channeling White Light. So you guys can go find her, follow her, connect with her. I know you've also, because you have this on your website, you've been featured in a lot of different news outlets. You have Fox 21 local news, NBC, ABC, Cosmic Tuesdays, Queen City News, just to name a few. So I just want to say thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's really cool to learn
Uh,
about different mediums and psychics and how spirit works with them. So
yeah,
before we go off, any last words you'd like to say to our listeners?
you can do it.
Yes, yes, you can do it. All right. Oh, just want to say goodbye, everybody, and thank you for listening. Okay, bye.